The following documentary was produced at Sacramento, California in 1969 and is based on the part the Central Pacific Railroad played in building the Transcontinental Railroad. The series was produced by KCRA news cameraman Barry Garland and starred Kent Pierce, who also worked for KCRA but as a newsman. In the film, Kent plays an 1861 version of himself. This film, being produced locally in Sacramento, probably used a lot of local talent for the many personalities that appear in the film. Maybe someone can tell us who some of these folks are. If you do recognize anyone, or if you yourself appear in the film, please let us know in the comment section below. Meanwhile, thank you for watching. Have a great day, and don't hesitate to hit that like button and subscribe. Thank you.
It was the spring of 1861 when I set out to find Theodore Judah. Judah was being called Crazy Judah because he claimed he could build a railroad through the Sierra Nevada. I was sent by my editor to find him, talk with him, and determine if he was really a crazy dreamer, or maybe the man who just might have the key to fulfilling the 15-year ambition of this country to build a railroad all the way across the continent. Well, the friction between North and South had burst into open bloody war just a month before. Southern members of Congress went home and took their opposition to the Pacific Railroad Act with them. Could be the time was ripe for Judah's dream to come true.
What are you doing here, stranger? Gentlemen, I'm a reporter.
I explained to the wary sourdoughs that I was a newspaper reporter and looking for the Judah Survey Party. They indicated that Judah and his crew of surveyors had been through that area a day or two before, but they were not convinced of the soundness of Judah's idea.
Yeah, I told them they were crazy, plumb crazy.
You don't think it can be done?
Impossible. You can't get in here anyway to pan gold. Those guys are going to put an iron horse over this mountain. Impossible.
How would I find where the surveyors party is working now?
Oh, that's easy. They took off and they left the line of stakes. Right on up the mountain. All you got to do is follow them.
Fine. Well, thank you very much.
Well, it's time to get back to work.
A few miles ride and I caught up with the survey party. I introduced myself to Judah. Although he was a little skeptical of reporters, when he saw that my interest was genuine, he spoke freely of his idea. He was convinced that with the help of a druggist in Dutch Flat, he'd found the logical path through the mountains.
It looks good. It looks like the route. What will the route follow, sir? What route have you chosen? It'll start from Sacramento, go up the ridge between the American River and the Bear River. We found an easy grade over Donner Summit, and beyond that, the Truckee River Canyon carries us into Nevada territory without crossing the second range of the Sierra. That is the way to go, and that's what this survey will prove.
He added that only if the 4 Sacramento merchants who were backing his survey were willing to back the railroad's actual construction would his dream be realized. At my request, he agreed to let me know when he thought that decision would be made.
I hope so. Thank you.
After meeting him and talking with others who believed in him, I became convinced that Judah was not crazy at all. This man's genius had already built 2 railroads, the Niagara Gorge and the railroad from Sacramento to Folsom. I had a hunch that Judah's dream might be sound, so I decided to keep a journal of the events from that day on. June 21st, 1861. Your reporter, Kent Pierce.
Say, aren't you the guy that's been writing all the stories about the Transcontinental Railroad?
Yes, I am. I'm supposed to meet with the backers of the railroad later this morning.
Oh, all those guys come in here to get shaved.
You know the man?
Yeah.
What do you know about Mr. Stanford?
Well, Stanford, he's a grocer from up Auburn. Real opportunist. He'd like to be politician, maybe senator, governor, state of California.
How about some of the others, say Huntington, for example?
Oh, Huntington, Hopkins? Oh, they got a nice store here in town. Huntington, he's a pretty sharp man. Hopkins, not too much. He whines and cries a lot.
How about this guy Crocker?
Oh, probably of the whole bunch, Crocker would have the best chance of putting the whole thing over.
I understand he's kind of a hard drinker.
He lives hard, he thinks hard, but he's got the ability. He might put it over.
What do you think of the chances for building a transcontinental railroad?
Oh, the smart money in San Francisco says no, but who can tell? We need it. Maybe they could do it.
This is a historic event. We are going to build a railroad. Isn't that right, Mr. Crocker?
If we can get the men in
Mr. Judah, good to see you again.
Good to see you again, Pierce.
Good to see you again, Mr. Judah.
I'd like you to meet Mr. Leland Stanford.
How do you do,
How do you do, Mr.
Stanford?
Pierce? You're the journalist that Mr. Judah's been telling us about.
Yes, sir, I am. I'm interested in knowing what took place in your meeting today.
We've just formed the Central Pacific Railroad Company, and I've been elected its president. At last, we are going to have a transcontinental railroad that links California to the rest of the nation.
Well, this sounds like not only an ambitious, but a rather expensive enterprise.
It is. It's going to cost at least $12.5 million to go over the summit of the Sierra to the Nevada Territory.
Do you have that kind of money?
Well, not at present, but we expect to send our chief engineer, Mr. Judah, to Washington to promote our enterprise and see if we can get assistance from the United States government by land grants and government bonds.
Aren't you a candidate for public office?
I certainly am, young man. My party, the Republican Party, has selected me to represent them as a candidate in the upcoming election for governor of this great state. And I hope that I can count on my colleagues like Charlie Crocker here to help me get elected.
You know, with Stanford as president of this company, I think we are in serious trouble.
Not only politically, but financially.
Excuse me, gentlemen. My name is Pierce.
Mark Hopkins. This is Carlos P. Huntington.
Mr. Huntington, how do you do?
How do you do? Judah told us about you.
I couldn't help overhearing, sir, a little note of dissatisfaction.
Yes, I think the board made a very serious mistake
In what way, sir?
in electing Stanford as president of this company.
Well, why is that?
I don't think he's qualified. He may be well qualified to be governor if elected, but I don't think he should be president of our company.
What office were you elected to, sir?
Well, I was elected to vice president.
And what will you be doing as vice president of this newly formed enterprise?
Well, I'll be going back to Washington with Judah, and we'll be trying to promote funds necessary to complete the railroad.
Mr. Judah has over 5 years' experience in dealing with Washington and politicians. What do you feel that you could add to this effort?
Well, he doesn't have the political connections that I have both here in California and in Washington. And I feel that through these connections that I could see the completion of this railroad.
Well, in spite of your skepticism, you are throwing all your energies into the project.
Well, we have to. Every one of us will lose everything we have if this railroad fails.
The newly elected officers left to celebrate at a local hotel. One man stayed behind, though, Charles Crocker, who was destined to be the man who would build the railroad.
I'm a director in the new company.
And what will you be doing?
Now, I hope to be in charge of construction across from Sacramento over the Sierra and into the territory.
Have you ever built a railroad before?
No, I'm a dry goods merchant, but I saw the Sacramento Valley Railroad put together, and I realize material and money, but it takes men, and I know how to handle men. But you must realize that I can't hire a man or lay a rail if Huntington and Judah are not successful in Washington.
Thank you, sir. It was just a year from that first meeting until Huntington sent his colorful wire announcing that the Railroad Act had passed. Washington, July 1, 1862. Gentlemen, we have drawn the elephant. Now let's see if we can harness him. Huntington. Well, the passage of the Railroad Act provided the Central Pacific with most of the wherewithal it needed to get going. But that wasn't going to be as easy as it looked at that moment. July 4th, 1862. Your reporter, Kent Pierce. remember well my last meeting with Theodore Judah in Sacramento. Friction had developed that summer in 1863 between him and his backers, the Big Four. They were all mortgaged to the hilt, and they had agreed to give Judah control of the Central Pacific if he could secure the cash backing to buy them out. He was going east to do just that, but on his voyage, Theodore caught yellow fever in Panama and died 2 days after his arrival in New York. Well, the Big Four named Theodore's assistant, Samuel Montague, to succeed him. From the fall of 1863, when the first rail was laid, till end of track reached Newcastle in 64, things went smoothly. Charlie Crocker solved the critical labor shortage problem that cropped up that year with Chinese workers. The Chinese were a favorite subject for photographers. In the year that followed, thousands were brought over to build roadbed through the toughest terrain ever to face a railroad, the Sierras. In the summer of 65, near Clipper Gap, I witnessed the enthusiasm of the Irish track layers, who, with 10,000 Chinese building ahead of them, seemed to know they were making history.
In 1861, I put me corduroy breeches on, to work upon the railway. Filly me oorie-oorie-ay, filly me oorie-oorie-ay, filly me oorie-oorie-ay, to work upon the railway. When we left Ireland to come here and spend our latter days and cheer our bosses, they did drink strong beer while we worked on the railway. Filly me oorie-oorie-ay, filly me oorie-oorie-ay, filly me oorie-oorie-ay, to work upon the railway. It's Pat do this and Pat do that, without a stocking or a cap, and nothing but an armed cravat to work upon the railway. Filly me oorie-oorie-ay, filly me oorie-oorie-ay, filly me oorie-oorie-ay, to work upon the railway. One Monday morning, to our surprise, a half an hour before sunrise, the dirty dill went up to the skies and Pat worked on the railway. Filly me oorie-oorie-ay, filly me oorie-oorie-ay, filly me oorie-oorie-ay, to work upon the railway.
Well, 12,000 men were involved in that battle to defeat the Sierras, chiseling, blasting, and carving roadbed and tunnels through the unyielding granite. In July, we heard that the Union Pacific, the railroad authorized to build west from Omaha, had laid its first rail on the western bank of the Missouri River. Well, the race was on, and it was tough. 3 of the worst winters the Sierra had ever seen hit the Central Pacific full force. It took until the summer of 68 to complete the tracks over, under, and around the granite and snow to the roaring town the railroad had built at Truckee Meadows, Reno. It was a town made for the lusty rail gangs. Liquor, gambling, and women were in ample supply.
Sure is a slow night tonight, Patsy. Sure is, honey.
What'll it be, stranger? Beer, please.
Where are you from, stranger?
Sacramento.
What brings you to town?
I'm a newspaper man. I'm here to check on the progress of the railroad.
Well, welcome to Reno. See you later.
Excuse me, gentlemen, you have a chair open here, may I? May I join you? Would you like to buy in? No thanks, I'll just watch if I may. I understand the Transcontinental Railroad is going to be completed in another week or so. That sounds good for business. Well, you shouldn't have any reason to complain. Reno's doing pretty well as it is. Well, we can do better here.
How often do you get trains from California out here? There's one a day coming in now. Well, that's got to be pretty good growth. The town won't be a year old for another month. How big is it now? Oh, about 10,000 there, about. Okay. Well, do you think the Transcontinental Railroad will help the growth of Reno? Well, it'll help to a degree, I guess, but I think it's going to dry up as far as my business-wise. They're going to just go around and buy to California, I'd think. Oh, shut up and play cards.
Towns like Reno had sprung up all along the railroad's march across the desert. At points selected to accommodate the locomotive's need for water and wood, stations were built. These became railroad towns, meccas for the lusty rail gang's desires for gambling and liquor and women. Tents became shacks, and business boomed. By October, the rail line stretched through Wadsworth and Browns clear to Winnemucca. 7,000 men were involved in Central Pacific's race to beat Union Pacific, but they faced a new problem. On the Great Barren Plateau, there was no timber for ties, no water, no feed for the draft animals. All these had to be hauled to the end of track. Despite the hardships, the railroads were closing the gap between them at the rate of 8 miles a day. Along the Central Pacific, more towns sprang up: Argenta, Elko, Wells, then north into Utah, to Lucin. On speculation, both companies had their crews build roadbed far beyond a likely point of interception. At one time, they overlapped by 100 miles.
Two, huh?
Well, Congress finally decided what the railroads had been unable to. The tracks would meet at Promontory Summit, Utah, and that was that. By early May, the race was over. Just a rail's length stood between the end of track for both the Central Pacific and the Union Pacific. It was a time for ceremony. Well, Dr. Harkness, publisher of the Sacramento newspaper, was there to present the precious spikes that would mark the completion of that monumental 6.5-year job. Harkness was a little displeased. 3 of the big 4 hadn't made it at all. Of the men who built Central Pacific, only Stanford was there. Durant represented the Union Pacific. Finally, Harkness stepped forward.
California, within whose borders and by whose citizens the Pacific Railroad was inaugurated, desires to express her appreciation of the vast importance to her and her sister states of the great enterprise which by joint action is about to be consummated. From her mines of gold she has forged a spike. On its head is inscribed the last spike. On 3 sides, the names of railroad officials. And on the 4th side, this sentence: as this railroad unites the 2 great oceans of the world, may God continue the unity of our country. Dr. Durant.
Thank you, Dr. Harkness.
Then Durant placed that gold spike in the pre-drilled, polished laurel tie. And the last spike, one of iron, was driven home into an ordinary tie. The 119 in the Jupiter moved forward to touch pilots, and the job was done. Well, Colonel Savage and A.J. Russell managed to take some photographs of the event. Although the well-known photographer hired by the railroads, William Henry Jackson, got his dates mixed up and showed up a week late. The pictures taken showed only a little evidence of the wild celebration that preceded and followed that ceremony. Seems the minister was upset by the presence of a large contingent of scarlet ladies. 3,000 gallons of good Kentucky bourbon had been on hand for a week. The women, the lusty rail gangs, and 4 companies of the 21st Infantry, including the band, had been celebrating for 2 days already. It was a dandy party. Years later, survivors were looked upon with the same awe as survivors of the battles at Gettysburg and Shiloh. Finally, with the country bound together by rail, the national dream, coast-to-coast train travel, was realized, and more people began moving west.
Yes.
I'm a reporter. Could I ask you a couple of questions?
Certainly.
Why is it you're going west?
I've just been assigned to a post out in California.
See? Is this your first time west?
Yes, it is.
What value is the railroad to the military, the Transcontinental Railroad?
Well, I don't know. I think this is one of the greatest values of the railroad as far as movement of personnel, dispatches, everything. As far as speed, it's fantastic. I think it's one of the best things that's happened to our country. As far as movement of any type of personnel, whether it be military or civilian, it's going to mean an awful lot to the West California.
But I think
Excuse me, ma'am.
Oh, yes?
I'm a newspaper man. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about why you're traveling west. Why is it you're moving west?
Well, I have a job in Grass Valley as an English teacher. After my husband died, I thought I'd make a sort of a new break and go west. And finally I got enough courage and I thought, well, why not? A lot of people are coming out here.
Did the railroad make a difference, ma'am?
Oh, yes. I mean, I wouldn't have traveled in a covered wagon, not me.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, excuse me. Is this your first train trip west?
Huh?
I say, is this your first train trip west?
No, it ain't.
Excuse me, folks. I'm a newspaper man, and I'm asking a few questions of passengers here on the train. Why is it you folks are going west?
Well, our son went west about 20 years ago when the gold rush was on, but he now has a ranch. He's married, has grandchildren that we've never seen, so we want to go out and see them.
Well, how about this Transcontinental Railroad?
Well, we never could have made this trip if it hadn't been for that. 28 days by stagecoach, and my health hasn't been good. I just couldn't have made it.
Well, how many days has it taken you on the train?
4 days from Omaha. I think it's wonderful.
I close my journal with this thought and simple dedication. To the dreamer, Theodore Judah. What man can imagine, man can create. June 5th, 1870. Your reporter, Kent Pierce. The railroad's built from shore to shore. It's finished. It's completed. The wrath of nature, time, and space, they all have been defeated. Over Sierra's granite crest, men laid the rails to glory. 2 threads of iron they slowly wove, the road to Promontory. A miracle has been performed in spite of nature's dreads. The fabric of this nation is at last bound fast with iron